October 1962, a moment in human history when humanity had no idea how close it had come to its own destruction. The lights were still burning in Washington, D.C. Footsteps echoed endlessly through the corridors of the Pentagon, and inside the Oval Office of the White House sat a president with no sleep in his eyes, carrying the weight of a decision that could determine the fate of millions.
This was not just a conflict between America and the Soviet Union. It was a question of humanity's very survival.
But the darkest and most unknown chapter of this story happened behind closed doors, where a few people stood against a false warning, quietly, courageously, and that silent act of resistance may have saved the world.
Today, we are going to tell that story.
Since the late 1950s, an invisible war had been unfolding between the United States and the Soviet Union.
It was not a war of guns, but a war of fear. A war of nuclear weapons. In the race to prove who was more powerful and who could strike first, the two nations became so dangerously obsessed that the entire world seemed to be sitting on a mountain of explosives. In 1959, Fidel Castro came to power in Cuba. Suddenly, a communist state had emerged right at America's doorstep. Washington grew uneasy, and Moscow saw an opportunity. Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev realized that Cuba could become his greatest chess piece. If Soviet nuclear missiles could be placed just 90 miles away from the United States, the balance of power would change completely. America would no longer feel safe. And when a nation no longer feels secure, it can be forced to come to the negotiating table. Beginning in the summer of 1962, Soviet ships quietly started making their way toward Cuba. From the outside, there was no way to know what those ships were carrying deep inside their hulls. But the Central Intelligence Agency was not asleep. High above the clouds, the U-2 spy plane, America's most secret intelligence aircraft, circled over Cuba almost every day. Its powerful cameras captured every corner of the ground below. Those images were then rushed to special analysis rooms in Washington, where CIA photo analysts worked around the clock. October 14, 1962. One U-2 aircraft flew over western Cuba. The next morning, when the photographs reached the analysts' desks, the air inside the room suddenly felt heavier. The photographs revealed something terrifying with unmistakable clarity: launch pads for medium-range ballistic missiles. Soviet SS for nuclear missiles. Weapons capable of carrying nuclear warheads to Washington, New York, and Chicago within minutes. That night, President John F. Kennedy's National Security Advisor, McGeorge Bundy, received the news. The following morning, Kennedy himself was informed. What that morning inside the Oval Office felt like is difficult to describe. When a president learns that death is standing at his nation's doorstep, what happens to the color of his face? Do his hands begin to shake? Kennedy did not tremble. But deep inside, he understood that this crisis demanded something he had never faced before. He secretly formed a special advisory group known as EXCOM, the Executive Committee of the National Security Council. Among its members were Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, Secretary of State Dean Rusk, the President's brother and Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, along with several other top officials. The meetings of this committee were so secret that no newspapers reported them. No radio station announced them. The world still had no idea that its fate was being decided inside a closed room. But at the very same time, another chapter of this story was beginning, far less known, yet perhaps even more important. Inside the CIA's Intelligence Analysis Division, a special report was being prepared. The report claimed that the Soviet missiles stationed in Cuba were nearly ready for launch, and that the Soviet Union could strike the United States at any moment. If that document had reached the president exactly as written, what might have happened next? A large part of the military leadership demanded immediate airstrikes. Destroy the Soviet bases in Cuba. Do it now. If America waited any longer, they warned, the United States itself could come under attack. But at that critical moment, a few individuals chose to stop and ask difficult questions. One of them was Sherman Kent, head of the CIA's Board of National Estimates. Before becoming an intelligence analyst, he had been a historian. And he believed that intelligence should never rely on fear or assumption alone. It needed evidence, solid evidence. Sherman Kent and several members of his team went back to the photographs once again. They studied them carefully. Then they analyzed them all over again. What they found raised serious doubts. Yes, the images clearly showed the presence of missiles. But there was no solid proof that the launch systems were fully operational. There was no confirmation that nuclear warheads had actually been installed. And from the photographs alone, it was impossible to know exactly what the Soviet soldiers on the ground were doing. They said, a war cannot be started based on this information. Saying this was not easy. Pressure was coming from everywhere: attack now, strike immediately, do not wait. The military generals were growing impatient. Politicians were becoming afraid. The public knew nothing, but if they had known, they might have screamed too. In that moment, saying, "Stop, think one more time," was an act of courage. It was an act of wisdom. That became their greatest contribution. At the same time, some U.S. Air Force officers were raising questions too. They were asking, what is the source of this warning? Who provided this information? Are we going to start a nuclear war based on a single source? Many people did not like these questions at the time. But those questions may have saved the world. There was a terrifying reality at that time, something discovered many years later. There were not only medium-range missiles in Cuba. There were also short-range tactical nuclear weapons. And permission to use those weapons had been placed in the hands of local Soviet commanders, without approval from Moscow. If America had launched an airstrike on Cuba, the Soviet commander there could have decided to fire nuclear weapons himself. And what would have happened after that is terrifying even to imagine. America did not have this information at the time. They did not know that an airstrike could directly begin a nuclear war. Those who urged caution may not have known all this, but their caution, their doubts, and their questions may have protected the world from catastrophe. The 13-day crisis continued to escalate. Kennedy announced a naval blockade around Cuba. Soviet ships kept moving forward. The world held its breath. October 24, Soviet ships approached the American naval blockade. If they had continued forward, American warships might have opened fire. And then? But the ships stopped. Later it became known that Khrushchev himself was uncertain in Moscow at that moment. He also knew, if they moved forward, there would be no return. October 27th. The most terrifying day of the crisis. That day, an American U-2 aircraft was shot down by a Soviet missile over Cuba. Pilot Rudolf Anderson was killed. The ExComm committee erupted in chaos. The generals demanded immediate retaliation. An American aircraft had been destroyed. This was an act of war. But Kennedy paused. His brother Robert said, "We need a little more time. Diplomacy is not dead yet." That same day, another event happened, something even more terrifying. Deep beneath the sea near Cuba, a Soviet submarine was hiding, B-59. That submarine was carrying a nuclear torpedo. American warships found the submarine. Communication with the submarine had been cut off. Oxygen inside was running low. Outside, American ships were dropping depth charges. Submarine Captain Valentin Savitsky believed the war had already begun. He decided to launch the nuclear torpedo. Soviet rules required approval from 3 senior officers before launching the weapon. The captain agreed. The political officer agreed. But the third man, Flotilla Chief of Staff Vasily Arkhipov, refused. Arkhipov said, "We are not certain that war has begun. We must be sure first. A nuclear weapon cannot be launched now." The captain was shaking with anger. But Arkhipov stood firm in his decision. The submarine surfaced. Communication was restored. The nuclear torpedo was never launched. Vasily Arkhipov, a naval officer whose name is barely mentioned in history books, may have saved the entire world with a single decision that day. Meanwhile, negotiations continued in Washington. Robert Kennedy secretly met Soviet Ambassador Anatoly Dobrynin. He proposed, "We will not invade Cuba. In return, remove the Soviet missiles from Cuba." There was another secret proposal. America would also remove its Jupiter missiles from Turkey. But this could not be announced publicly. It would remain a secret deal. Khrushchev agreed. October 28. The Soviet Union announced, the missiles would be removed from Cuba. The 13-day crisis was over. But no one truly knew how close the world had come to destruction that day. Many years later, when the classified files were finally revealed, experts said, we had come far closer than we ever imagined. Those CIA analysts who refused to rush, who kept asking questions, did they know what they were doing? Maybe not. Maybe they were simply doing their job. Honestly. Carefully. But history tells us, real courage does not always explode like a bomb. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet question. Like a doubt. Like saying, think one more time. Those Air Force officers, those CIA analysts, and that submarine officer deep beneath the sea, all of them ultimately did the same thing. They stopped. They thought. And they said no. And that single word, no, may have been the most important word in human history. The world we live in today, with cities, people, children's laughter, and morning light, still exists because of the courage of unknown people. They received no awards. Most people do not even know their names. But every breath we take today carries their debt. The world once came terrifyingly close to ending. And it was stopped not by weapons, not by power, but by conscience.